What just happened at that press conference might have changed everything for Dillon Gabriel. In a single moment, just a few short words, the entire football world stopped and stared. Cameras were rolling, reporters were waiting, and Dillon sat there, expression calm but heavy, knowing exactly what was coming. The question that no quarterback ever wants to hear was finally asked. Are you worried about losing your job? And in that instant, with millions watching and the tension so thick you could cut it, Dillon gave the shortest answer of his entire career, just 7 words that sent shockwaves across social media. No, all I can do is control what I can control. At first it sounded simple, professional, even admirable. But the internet doesn't stop at face value, and within minutes, every fan, analyst, and sports commentator was dissecting his tone, his posture, the look in his eyes. Some said he sounded composed, others said he sounded broken. Some called it leadership under pressure, others called it the sound of a man who knows the end is near. And the craziest part, this wasn't just another loss, another tough post-game interview. This was the boiling point of a season that's been spiraling out of control. A season where every mistake, every sack, every bad throw has brought him one step closer to being replaced. Because this time, the name waiting behind him isn't just any backup. It's Shedeur Sanders, the son of a football legend, the golden prospect with a spotlight so bright it burns through walls. So when Dillon Gabriel answered that question with calm restraint, the world didn't hear peace. They heard pressure. They heard fear. They heard the sound of a man trying to stay steady while the ground beneath him cracks wide open. This wasn't just a press conference, it was a defining moment. A moment that revealed how fragile confidence can be when the spotlight turns harsh. A moment that showed what happens when talent, legacy, and media collide. And depending on how you see it, Dillon Gabriel either proved he's a professional who refuses to flinch, or a man bracing himself for the inevitable. Because make no mistake, the storm is coming, and everyone's watching to see who survives it. Every season has that moment, the one where frustration turns into disbelief, and disbelief turns into something darker. For Dillon Gabriel and his team, that moment came crashing down the second the scoreboard flashed 2-7. 2 wins, 7 losses. It's the kind of record that doesn't just sting, it haunts you. It follows you into the locker room, into the press room, into your sleep. You can see it in the players' faces, the way they walk off the field each week slower, heads down, shoulders heavy. The spark that once lit the huddle is gone, replaced by the dull weight of a team that can't seem to catch a break. The air around the franchise feels different now. It's thick, tense. You can feel it before kickoff, that uneasy silence where hope used to live. The fans are restless, the coaches are frustrated, and the media, they're circling like sharks. Everyone's asking the same question, but no one wants to say it out loud. Has Dillon Gabriel lost the locker room? And honestly, how could they not be asking that? When a team keeps losing, when games start slipping away the same way over and over again, people stop believing in bad luck. They start believing in bad leadership. Quarterbacks aren't just measured by touchdowns or passing yards. They're judged by how they respond when everything falls apart. And for Dillon, this season has been a slow-motion collapse. Behind the scenes, you can almost imagine the conversations happening in hushed tones. Assistants whispering about adjustments, players venting in group chats, the front office crunching numbers and thinking about what's next. Because at 2-7, everyone's job is on the line. Coaches, coordinators, starters, nobody's safe. And the one person who feels that pressure the most is always the quarterback, the face of the team. The guy who takes the podium after every loss and tries to explain the unexplainable. You can sense the breaking point in the way Dillon talks lately. He's saying all the right things about accountability, about preparation, about execution, but the conviction is starting to fade. His tone has that worn-down edge, the sound of a competitor who's been answering the same painful questions for weeks. He knows the noise is getting louder. He knows the spotlight isn't moving away. Because when it teams 2-7, excuses don't matter anymore. Stats don't matter. All that matters is the scoreboard, and that scoreboard has been brutally honest. Dillon Gabriel isn't just fighting to win games anymore. He's fighting to keep his career from unraveling right in front of him. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, they did. Because the game that pushed everything to the edge, the one that lit the fuse for the viral moment we're about to talk about, was a complete disaster. You could feel it from the opening drive. Something was off. The rhythm was gone, the confidence vanished, and the offense looked like it was moving through quicksand. It wasn't just another bad game. This was the kind of performance that makes fans question everything, from the coaching staff to the guy calling the plays to the quarterback under center. And in this case, that quarterback was Dillon Gabriel. By the halftime, the crowd had already started to turn. Boos echoed through the stadium, frustration pouring out like it had been building for weeks, because it had. The scoreboard told one story, but the body language told another. This team wasn't just losing, it was breaking. Dillon's stat line that night? Painful. 167 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 17 completions out of 32 attempts. On paper, not catastrophic, but anyone who watched the game knew better. The passes were late, the reads were off, the confidence just wasn't there. Every throw looked a little hesitant, every decision a little slower than it needed to be. And that hesitation cost him 6 sacks. 6! In a single game. That's not just pressure from the defense, that's pressure from within. The offense as a whole was flatlining. 278 total yards, the kind of number you expect to see in the preseason, not in a must-win game. But here's the kicker. They lost to a team that barely cracked 169 total yards. That's right, the opponent won with fewer than 200 yards of offense. Let that sink in. They didn't outplay Dillon's team, they simply outlasted them. When you lose a game like that, it's not just a loss, it's an embarrassment. It's the type of performance that makes highlight reels for all the wrong reasons. The kind that gets replayed on talk shows with dramatic music and slow-motion cuts of frustrated players slamming helmets on the sideline. And here's the worst part. You could see the frustration bleeding through Dillon's composure. The missed throws, the sacks, the stalled drives. Every mistake looked heavier than the last. It wasn't just a bad night, it was the night the season finally caved in on itself. The fans had already started to whisper about change, but after this game, the whispers turned into shouts. On social media, it was chaos. Hashtags started trending, fans calling for the rookie to step in, analysts debating whether Dillon had lost the locker room. And as the team filed into the locker room after yet another gut-wrenching loss, the cameras were already waiting, ready to capture whatever came next. Because when you're 2-7, every word becomes a headline, every expression becomes a meme, and the world was about to get the viral moment that would turn Dillon Gabriel's season, maybe even his career, upside down. The game was bad, but the press conference that followed, that's where things truly exploded. By the time Dillon Gabriel walked into that press room, the atmosphere was already thick enough to choke on. The lights were bright, the cameras locked in, and every reporter in the building was ready to pounce. You could hear the faint buzz of whispered questions, the low hum of anticipation, because everyone knew what this press conference was going to be. This wasn't about breaking down plays or analyzing stats anymore. This was about accountability. This was about answers. Dillon took his seat, still in uniform, a towel draped around his neck. His eyes looked tired, not just physically, but mentally. You could tell this wasn't a quarterback who just had a rough game. This was a man carrying the weight of an entire losing season on his shoulders. The room went quiet for half a second, and then the questions started flying. At first, everything sounded routine, the kind of softball questions every player gets after a loss. What went wrong on third down? How did you feel about the play calling? Was communication better with the new offensive coordinator? Dillon answered calmly. He talked about execution, about rhythm, about finding comfort in Tommy's system. It was all standard press conference speak, the kind of stuff that keeps headlines polite and coaches happy. But it didn't take long for the tone to shift. The questions started to dig deeper. The phrasing got sharper. You could almost feel the reporters circling closer to the one topic everyone wanted to address, but nobody wanted to be the first to say. Dillon stayed composed, nodding, answering with the kind of professionalism you'd expect from a veteran. But there was something in his voice, a crack, a strain, that gave away just how much pressure he was under. Then came the question about head coach Kevin, about how he was sticking with Dillon as the starter despite the record, despite the losses, despite the growing frustration from fans. The reporter's words were polite, but the message underneath was brutal. "Why are you still the guy?" You could see Dillon take a breath before answering. He said all the right things, that change is part of the conversation when things aren't working, that you can't expect different results by doing the same thing over and over again, that he takes ownership of the mistakes. His tone was calm, but his eyes said something else. He knew exactly where the line of questioning was headed. Everyone in that room did. Because once a reporter opens the door to change, it's only a matter of time before someone walks straight through it. The unspoken question was now hanging in the air. If things don't change soon, is it time for someone else to step in? Every answer Dillon gave was buying him time, trying to stay professional, trying not to feed the storm, but the storm was already forming. And as the questions kept coming, the tension kept building. It was only a matter of when, not if, someone would bring up the one name that had been dominating every sports headline for weeks. And then, after a long pause and a shuffle of microphones, it happened. A reporter leaned forward, his voice cutting through the silence.
"So, Dillon, do you ever look over your shoulder and think about when they might hand this thing over to Shedeur Sanders?" The room froze. You could hear cameras clicking, fingers stopping mid-type. Dillon didn't move, didn't blink. For a few seconds, it felt like time stopped. This was it, the moment everyone had been waiting for. What he said next would decide everything. The headlines, the debates, the viral clips, maybe even his future. Because this wasn't just a question. It was the question. And Dillon Gabriel's answer was about to echo across the entire football world. You could feel the air get heavier the second that question left the reporter's mouth. Do you ever look over your shoulder and think about when they might hand this thing over to Shedeur Sanders? It wasn't just a question. It was a loaded weapon disguised as curiosity. Every lens in that room zoomed in. Every journalist leaned forward. Every person watching from home felt that secondhand tension crawl up their spine. Dillon Gabriel didn't flinch. He didn't roll his eyes or shake his head. He just sat there, still as stone, his hands folded on the table. The pause that followed felt like an eternity. 3, maybe 4 seconds of pure silence. And then he gave the answer that would send the internet into meltdown. "No. All I can do is control what I can control." That was it. 7 words. No emotion, no elaboration, no explanation. Just that. A short, almost mechanical response that instantly went viral. Within minutes, clips of that moment were flooding X, TikTok, and Instagram. The same 7 words were being replayed, remixed, and analyzed like a cryptic message from a man under siege. At first glance, it sounded composed, mature even. The kind of thing athletes say when they're trying to stay above the noise. But this wasn't just another "focus on the process" line. This was something different. There was a chill in his voice, a sense of exhaustion that you can't fake. It wasn't anger, it was fatigue. The kind that only comes when you've been beaten down week after week, asked the same questions, forced to defend yourself every time you step behind a microphone. Fans picked up on it instantly. Some praised him for keeping his cool, calling it veteran composure and textbook professionalism. They said he handled a brutal moment with class, refusing to give the media the meltdown they wanted. But to others, that 7-word answer sounded like surrender. They called it lifeless, robotic, even defeated. They said it wasn't what a leader says. It's what a man says when he knows his time is running out. And maybe that's why it hit so hard. Because underneath that calm exterior, there was something deeper. The pause before he spoke wasn't hesitation. It was realization. A quiet moment of truth between the noise. He knew exactly what the question meant, and he knew there was no right answer. If he dismissed Shedeur Sanders, he'd look insecure. If he defended himself too hard, he'd look defensive. So he did the only thing he could. He deflected. He controlled what he could control. But here's the irony. Those words became the one thing he couldn't control. They took on their own life. Analysts slowed the clip down frame by frame, dissecting his tone and micro-expressions. Commentators debated whether he looked confident or defeated. Even former players weighed in, some calling it the response of a true pro, others saying it sounded like a man already bracing for the bench.
And while all that noise exploded online, the real story wasn't just what Dillon said, it was what he didn't say. He didn't say, "I'm still the guy." He didn't say, "They believe in me." He didn't say, "Shedeur's got to wait his turn." He didn't defend his job. He didn't defend his record. He didn't defend himself. That silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. It was the kind of moment that transcends sports. One short, heavy sentence that said everything without saying much at all. Because that's what happens when a man's confidence collides with public doubt. It's quiet, it's brief, and it leaves everyone wondering if they just witnessed the beginning of the end. But here's the thing about this story. It doesn't stop at Dillon Gabriel. Because the name that triggered that question, the one sitting quietly in the background waiting for his chance, isn't just any backup. He's Shedeur Sanders, and his shadow is only getting bigger. When the name Shedeur Sanders came up in that press conference, it wasn't just another quarterback being mentioned, it was a thunderclap. The kind of name that instantly changes the temperature in the room. Because Shedeur isn't just another backup waiting his turn. He's the son of Deion Coach Prime Sanders, a football legend whose shadow stretches from the NFL to college football and beyond. When your father's name is synonymous with swagger, talent, and spotlight, expectations aren't optional. They're inherited. Shedeur has been groomed for this moment his entire life. Every throw, every huddle, every headline since college has been building to this. He's got the pedigree, the presence, and the charisma that turns heads before he even steps onto the field. And that's exactly why his name carries so much weight. This isn't just about who can complete more passes, it's about legacy. It's about the changing of the guard. See, when a team's 2-9, fans start looking for something, anything, to believe in. They want hope, a spark, a reason to tune in again. And right now, Shedeur Sanders represents that hope. The son of a legend, waiting quietly on the sidelines while the starter struggles. That's not just a football storyline, that's a movie script. Every fan, every pundit, every social media post is feeding the narrative. Is it time for Coach Prime's son to take over? And here's where it gets even more interesting. This isn't just a battle on the field, it's a battle for attention. Shedeur Sanders brings more than just skill. He brings a brand. He's already a social media powerhouse, a name that trends before he even throws a pass. Jerseys sell because of him. Cameras follow him even when he's not playing. That's power, the kind that teams, sponsors, and networks notice. And when the product on the field starts to falter, that kind of buzz becomes impossible to ignore. Behind closed doors, you can bet the conversations are already happening. Reports claim that some members of the coaching staff are intrigued, wondering if maybe it's time to see what Shedeur can do under pressure. Rumors suggest that there have been quiet discussions about giving him snaps late in games or even starting him once the season is officially lost. Nothing confirmed, nothing official, but the whispers are getting louder every week. And the truth is, this isn't even about fairness anymore. It's about momentum. When a fan base loses faith in its starting quarterback, it's like a wildfire, and Shedeur Sanders has become the symbol of the reset button everyone's begging for. He's the shiny new promise sitting right there on the bench, waiting to be unleashed.
But this situation is a double-edged sword, because for Dillon Gabriel, every whisper of Shedeur's name cuts a little deeper. Every highlight reel, every mention of Coach Prime's son is another reminder that his replacement isn't just possible, it's inevitable if things don't change. And for Shedeur, the pressure is just as heavy. He's not walking into a clean slate, he'd be stepping into chaos with the weight of a famous name and a desperate franchise on his shoulders. Still, no matter how you spin it, one thing is crystal clear. This isn't just a quarterback controversy anymore. It's a cultural event, a collision of fame, family, and football that's rewriting the narrative in real time. And the longer this team keeps losing, the louder those calls for Shedeur are going to get. Because at this point, the fans don't just want to win. They want a story. They want redemption, energy, and change. And in their minds, Shedeur Sanders is all three wrapped up into one. But for Dillon Gabriel, that story comes with a cruel twist. Because every time someone chants Shedeur's name, it's another reminder that his time might be running out. And as the pressure mounts, the real question becomes, how much longer can Dillon hold on before the inevitable happens? For Dillon Gabriel, this isn't just about football anymore. It's about identity. It's about survival. When you've spent your entire life being the guy, the starter, the leader, the face of the franchise, watching that slip away doesn't just hurt your career, it shakes who you are. And right now, Dillon's caught in that silent battle between confidence and doubt, the one every athlete dreads, but few ever talk about. Every time he steps to the podium, you can see it, that flicker in his eyes, part determination, part exhaustion. He's saying all the right things. We have to execute. We're close. We just need to finish. But the words feel heavier now, like he's trying to convince himself as much as everyone else. Because when a team's record reads 2-9, no one wants to hear about progress. They want results. They want wins. They want proof that the man under center can actually lead them out of the mess they're in. And the truth is, Dillon's running out of time to prove that. It's not that he's untalented, far from it. His arm strength is there. His leadership is respected. His football IQ is solid. But in this league, potential means nothing without production. When you're a quarterback, every mistake gets magnified. Every missed read becomes a headline. And every sack becomes another reason for the fans to call for your replacement. You can tell Dillon knows it. He's been careful with his words lately, almost guarded. Every sentence sounds measured, like he's walking a tightrope between honesty and self-preservation. When he admits the team isn't playing winning football, that they're beating themselves, he's not wrong. But beneath those lines lies something deeper. The quiet awareness that he might not be the one to get to fix it. Because here's the reality. The organization's patience is running thin. They've already changed offensive coordinators. They've adjusted the playbook. They've shuffled lineups. And yet, the results are the same. When that happens, there's only one move left to make. The quarterback. Dillon knows that. The coaches know that. The fans definitely know that. Still, what makes this situation so complex is that Dillon hasn't quit. You can hear it in how he talks about execution in crucial moments. That phrase has become his mantra, a desperate belief that if they can just clean up those small mistakes, everything might turn around. But at some point, words stop mattering because football is a results business. And at 2-7, the numbers speak louder than anything he can say. There's a certain kind of pressure that comes with knowing your job might not be yours much longer. Every throw becomes a test. Every drive feels like a final exam. And when your replacement has a name as big as Sanders, the margin for error disappears completely. But here's the part most people miss. Dillon Gabriel isn't just fighting the scoreboard. He's fighting perception. Once the media labels you as struggling, every success looks temporary and every mistake looks fatal. Once the fans lose faith, even your best moments start to look like flukes. That's the trap Dillon's in right now.
No matter what he says, no matter how he plays, the conversation keeps circling back to one thing. When will Shedeur take over? So what does this all mean for Dillon? It means he's standing at a crossroads, one that every athlete eventually faces. Down one path is redemption, the chance to silence the noise, string together a few wins, and remind everyone why he earned this job in the first place. Down the other is the reality of the business, where potential replacements don't wait patiently forever. If Dillon wants to survive this, he needs to do more than talk about execution. He needs to deliver. Because if he doesn't, someone else will. And that someone's last name carries enough weight to make sure the whole world is watching when it happens. The next snap, the next drive, the next game, every moment counts now. Dillon Gabriel isn't just playing for a win anymore. He's playing for his career. And as the pressure builds and the noise grows louder, one thing becomes certain. This story isn't just about who can throw the better football. It's about who can handle the storm. What makes this story so magnetic isn't just the stats, the losses, or even the looming quarterback switch. It's what it represents. It's the raw, unfiltered humanity of a man under pressure, laid bare for the world to dissect. Dillon Gabriel's viral press conference really wasn't about football at all. It was about vulnerability. It was about how someone holds themselves together when the foundation beneath them starts to crack. And that's why the internet couldn't look away. In a world where every word is recorded, clipped, and replayed, one short sentence, "All I can do is control what I can control," became a mirror reflecting something much bigger. For fans, it was the sound of frustration. For critics, it was a sign of defeat. But for millions of people watching from their phones, it felt strangely relatable. Because who hasn't been there? Who hasn't faced the fear of being replaced? Of working hard and still not being enough? That's what made this moment explode. It was real. Sports fans love drama, but what they crave even more is truth. And this moment gave them both. You could see the honesty in Dillon's eyes, the exhaustion in his tone, the resignation in his body language. It wasn't a rehearsed soundbite. It was the quiet sigh of a man who's been fighting a battle he knows he might not win. It was a moment of silence that spoke louder than any touchdown celebration ever could. But there's another layer to why this went viral, and it has everything to do with Shedeur Sanders. In today's era of sports entertainment, narratives drive engagement more than box scores. The son of a global icon waiting in the wings while the starter falters? That's not just a storyline, it's a cultural event. It's legacy versus desperation, the old guard versus the next generation. Every football fan,
Content creator, and sports show in America suddenly had something to say, not because of the stats, but because of what it symbolized. And let's be honest, the timing couldn't have been more explosive. The team's collapse, the new coordinator, the fan unrest, all of it set the perfect stage for this tiny spark to ignite into a firestorm. The press conference was just the match. Social media was the gasoline. Within hours, clips were everywhere, slowed down, captioned, remixed. Analysts were breaking down Dillon's facial expressions frame by frame. TikToks with dramatic music labeled it the moment Dillon Gabriel broke. Others flipped the script, calling him a man refusing to flinch under fire. That's the beauty and the curse of the digital age. One sentence can redefine an athlete's narrative. One look can become a meme, a headline, a conversation. Dillon didn't mean to go viral, but he became the center of one of football's most talked about storylines overnight. And here's the real irony. His answer, "Control what I can control," was supposed to deflect attention, to calm the noise, but instead, it amplified it. It made people read between the lines, speculate about his mindset, and project their own fears onto his silence. In trying to stay professional, Dillon became vulnerable. And in today's world, vulnerability is viral. But beyond the clicks and debates, there's something deeply human about all this. Because what Dillon Gabriel is facing isn't just a football dilemma. It's a universal one. The fear of being replaced, the pressure to perform, the quiet moments of doubt when you start wondering if your best will ever be good enough. That's why fans can't stop talking about it, because it's not just his story anymore, it's everyone's. The next few weeks will decide how this story ends. Maybe Dillon rallies, silences the critics, and writes a comeback that nobody saw coming. Or maybe the Shedeur Sanders era begins, ushering in a new chapter for the team, one built on hype, hope, and the glow of a legendary last name. Either way, the world will be watching, because this moment, this viral press conference, was more than just a post-game Q&A. It was the collision of talent, legacy, and pressure. It was the truth breaking through the PR script. It was the sound of a man saying, without really saying it, "I know the storm is here, and I'm still standing." And that's why this story spread so fast, because deep down, everyone recognizes a storm when they see one. And whether you're a football fan or not, you can't help but wonder, when the dust settles, who's still going to be standing under center?